Hi, namaste, and welcome to Drag Me to Heaven, the podcast where we talk about drag artists and their faith practices. As I promised, I would be getting one episode each month. This is the second episode of this particular year, and I have a very wonderful artist with me who would be kind of coming ahead and sharing some of the very nuanced conversations about drag and faith and how exactly they navigate. So, in this conversation, we are definitely looking forward to kind of explore more ideas of faith and drag. But before that, if you are new to this particular channel, I would request you to kindly go ahead and subscribe to the channel in Spotify. In this episode, I have a very wonderful guest, that is Kareem Khubchandani, aka LaWhore Vagistan. Kareem Khubchandani is a researcher, a performance artist, and organizer. Kareem's research, teaching, and performance exist at the intersectional between queer nightlife, global politics, and ethnography, South Asian diaspora, and drag. Khubchandani performs in drag as LaWhore Rajasthan, who intervene storytelling, stand-up comedy, body art, theater, and digital work. They have been performing in multiple places across US and Asia, and they are have also written two books, Decolonizing Drag and Style, which talks about the South Asian aesthetic of drag and how exactly drag has been overtly part of the South Asian history. And I'm more than delighted to have LaWhore Vagistan in this particular podcast. I've been trying to kind of get them to speak, and this is something which is indeed a very great opportunity for me as well as for people who are listening to this podcast to seek and listen whatever the wisdom which LaWhore Vagistan shares. And without any further ado, let me quickly go ahead and chime in. LaWhore Vagistan. Hi everyone, my name is Patuni Shastri, aka Suffocated Art Specimen, aka SAS and SAS with an S, and I'm here to kind of come ahead and bring you a wonderful episode of Drag Me to Heaven. I know that you haven't expected this, but we are getting it back again. And this conversation is going on where we are talking with drag artists across the world to learn about perspectives on faith and how exactly drag is a part of it, and how we're kind of transcending both these topics together. And I have a very wonderful person as my guest. I've been kind of stalking them for ages now, and I think somewhere or the other way they have inspired me to do drag in how I do it in one or the other way. And I also see they are a resource of drag, if I could say. They have written books about the style of drag and how exactly drag has been evolved in the South Asia, and how exactly the entire idea of South Asian drag is visible in one or the other way. And I think I'm super excited to have this conversation. I'm firstly meeting for the very first time in an online setup, but I have been kind of looking out their work, and they are one of the biggest icons of South Asian drag in the world. Without any further ado, let me quickly go ahead and invite LaWhore Vagistan with me. Hi, LaWhore Vagistan. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm so happy to be here with you. This is such a kind introduction. Really appreciate that. And really happy to be talking to you.
Thank you so much. I have read about your, like your start of drag scene, and how did you kind of start? And I have also kind of learned about your initial way of idealizing the Indian drag, and not Indian drag, but South Asian drag, if I could say it in that way. And the word Lahore, Rajasthan as well, from where exactly it comes. The imagery of, Lahore, Rajasthan, or Rajasthan in its own nature. But I wanted to kind of hear it from your mouth to my audience who are listening for the first time. Could you please help us, briefly help us dive in with your travel with you for your journey of drag?
Yeah, I fell into drag. Drag was not something I planned to do. I was hosting a fundraiser. I was about 25 years old, living in Chicago, and we needed a South Asian drag artist, and I couldn't find one, and I did it, and it was a one-time thing. And and then the party that we threw kept happening, and I kept doing it. So it was called J-Ho. This was 2009, post Slumdog, of course. And the party keeps going, and it's till today. But I just kept performing because we were having a good time, and I was learning a lot, and it was hard work. It was very expensive. Um, to keep doing drag and buying new makeup and costumes and bras and things that just weren't in my closet, but I learned a lot and I was having a really good time. And our community was forming through that party. And I just kept up with it and have used drag to different ends for academic work and for my own entertainment and artistic growth and for community building. And I took up the name LaWhore Vagistan as a way of reckoning with my own political history. I was born in Gibraltar, grew up in Ghana, moved to the US, and I'm from a Sindhi merchant family that has been living outside of the subcontinent for now 70 plus years. And I my relationship to the subcontinent is much more expansive than India or Pakistan or wherever we're supposed to be from, and it's formed by histories of colonization, by the it's so Lahore Vagistan is both trying to reinvent a place for me, but also acknowledging how sex and sex work and sexiness and the body are part of that political history.
Okay, thank you so much for making us travel through your experience as well. I just want to add up to the same question which I had. At any point in time when you were kind of exploring the idea of drag or creating your drag persona, did your faith kind of be a part of the process? Were there any kind of a conscious ideas which kind of rolled in through to kind of talk with faith, if there is any kind of a dissociation with faith at when you are kind of starting creating the persona? Did faith played any kind of a way?
So I was raised in a Hindu family and in Ghana, and in particular in a Sindhi community where, at our temple we had the Guru Granth Sahib, we had the moon and the star in the same in the temple, right? It was this not necessarily multi-faith, but it was a more open environment. And I think and again, I hadn't had much exposure to sort of rising Hindutva politics at that time, and even being in diaspora. And it's after I moved to the US in 2000, and we saw the rise of the BJP and things like that, that I think my relationship to Hinduism changed extensively. My relationship to faith also changed because of some family stuff that, you know, Hinduism did not necessarily take a central role in my life. Over the years, so it was sort of between then and like starting to perform drag, as I researched, and I think, you know this about me, but research is very important to how I do drag, right? Understanding histories of gender performance and identity and social positions. So as I learned more about Sindhi communities and histories, I thought more about the relationship between Hindus and Muslims, the syncretic nature of our faith practices, and that is what has shown up in my drag. Um, and it's taken a while, right? I made numbers using Cavalli, for example, and that has been a way of connecting with faith, but also being with my community, right? These are the songs that my uncles, aunties used to sing. And these are not drag numbers per se, right? They don't have the arc of like a ballad. They're cyclical in their nature. So performing Cavalli and like trying to mix a track based on Cavalli is actually quite hard, because the song can go on for 8 minutes and it's the same thing over and over again. It's like, how does sort of the like stage drag number mix with the kind of faith, the songs of faith, and I know you have performed bhajans in drag, and I'm sure you encounter a similar challenge there of like, how do you perform in a way that holds the sacredness of the song and the kind of rhythmic work that it does with entertaining, you know. Um, but I'll say it was a journey, right? It was you asked, when I started performing, where was faith? It was not it was not there because I didn't have a relationship to faith at that time, right? I was working through some of my own family stuff to to do that. One example maybe I can give you of, I think this came through popular culture and not necessarily uh my own sort of experience was, I did a half and half number, a Radha Krishna number. It was a Student of the Year came out. I did the Radha song, half masculine, half feminine drag. Um, and there was a comfort and discomfort in performing that because as a kid I used to be dressed up as Krishna, right? For all the temple stuff. Um, and this time I got to be Radha, and it was cute. I got to be both, right? And I think that performance is on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. And it's messy and funny and weird and whatever. It's there. But that's sort of an early career sort of take on faith that was part of my drag.
Now I come to a very interesting, kind of a question. Through your work of research and drag, and also through the books which you have written, and also one of the very constant available content of South Asian drag is your TEDx video. And one thing which you always talk about is the auntiness of drag, and somewhere or the other way, I think putting that out as a reference helps a lot of drag artists who are younger, who are kind of looking into their own politics of how the world is kind of changing, to reposition themselves. And I've seen this as a trend, that a lot of the Indian younger people who are kind of performing drag, they somehow or the other way associate with the idea of auntiness, and auntie becomes a very political figure in one or the other way, to kind of constantly questions or disconnect with their system of thinking. Now, when I heard it for the very first time, there was one particular image which kind of came to me, was the Sas. Sas is the mother-in-law, and my name also, I basically used to call it as suffocated as specimen, and then like, okay, let me be the Sas, and the mother-in-law and how exactly they turn up into. And Could you also give us a little bit more, understanding of how did you kind of come across this auntiness within the cultural aspect of the cultural fabric? And are there any kind of references which you can help us ideate or reimagine the word auntie, especially with the drag lens?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think the auntie, especially the sass, is so demonized, right? And the auntie is that figure who's part of the family, but on the edge of the family. And so it becomes very useful for popular culture and in our everyday life to manipulate that position, right? For our own benefit, to lift up the mother, for example, and say, "Oh, aunties are so evil, but my mother is sacred and good," right? This is when we talk about faith and the way that we sort of valorize the mother through religion, through national rhetoric, all of these things. I think we use that to leave the auntie on the outside. Um, but we also love watching aunties on screen, right? We love the evil mother-in-law as well. She's a great melodramatic character, and we have to acknowledge the pleasure that she gives us and and the aspirations for so many queer people to want to be more like the villain than we want to be like the mother, right? The villain auntie than we want to be like the mother. Um, so just thinking about pop culture, I think those are some of the ways that we stage the auntie. But for me, I arrived at auntie myself for a few different reasons. One was I recorded this music video called Sorry that was a take on Justin Bieber's Sorry. And I was in the studio with my friend Vaijanti, who plays Auntie Cool Jams in that. And we're recording, and we're in between takes, and our music director was like, why don't you create some lines to fill in the musical bits, the instrumental bits? And so that's where we come up with that's looking like a 100 rupee sari. You look like Priyanka Chopra in that sari. Um, but it it astounded me how easy it was for us to imagine the auntie, right? And what she would say and how she would say, you need to nicely pin your sari, right? Who is this voice of judgment? Who is this voice whose compliments also mean so much, right? When she tells you you're fat, you're super ashamed, but when she tells you you're gorgeous, the compliment means more than anything, right? So it was in this moment where I was like, how do we know so much about aunties even if we're not them, right? Or we don't think of ourselves as them. Like it's this common language we speak. And so I think it's important for us to it was this sorry, it was this important moment for me to think about the discourse around aunties. You asked for like examples, I think when we think about Smriti Irani being called by one of the newspapers anti-national when she gave this diatribe in the parliament, you know, drawing on her Sass character, right? Or not on the character, but on the melodrama of TV serials, you know, there was something very recognizable about her anger. Uh, but then she says, "Don't call me auntie," right? And again, that is its own trope from many, many TV shows and from Dostana and Auntie Matko. Like, it's something actually that's repeated across a lot of pop culture. But then on the other hand, you see a lot of influencers and artists and other folks invoking their age and calling themselves Antifa, right? Like anti-fascist, right? But acknowledging that they are of a different generation than perhaps those who are sort of most pertinently making pop culture, and acknowledging that no, even our generation is anti-fascist, right? So plays on anti and anti, I think, are doing some interesting work to insist on the cross-generational value of radical politics, even as the auntie is often attributed as the figure who's holding us back from being radical, or as the figure of the most conservative form of politics. I hope that made sense.
So thank you so much for highlighting that. Now I'll get back to our the conversation which we are talking about faith and religion. Now there's always this challenge for any art form to kind of be twisted and used as a space to kind of instill hate. And it I've seen this kind of work very much with the entire idea of classical dance forms within India, especially it might be Bharatanatyam, which was being stolen from a certain kind of group of people, from a marginalized community, and then kind of sanitized it and presented it as a buffet of a very nuanced, divine kind of an art form. And there's the same thing which is also with other art forms which we are kind of seeing, like folk music, for example, where it's being sung for a certain purpose, but then been remixed into films and Bollywood films and Tollywood films, etc. Now, I see this is something which might be a uh, either it's happening as of now, or it's something which is a future situation for drag as well, with the entire idea of drag being a very sexual art form which is being kind of portrayed somewhere or the other way. There are artists who are kind of taking this into a certain way where they want to kind of sanitize it, make it something which is make it very much connected with people. And the only reason how can they sanitize it, to add it with a religion or add it with a faith practice. So this trend is something which is very much about to kick in, is what I kind of look out for. Having said that, that is one section of drag artists, whereas other section of drag artists are becoming what we say spiritual beings, where even if they are kind of coming from a certain spiritual practices or origin of religion, uh, as a community they're developing into a space where they are trying to recreate their own spiritual ideologies while they are performing drag, which is also inclusive, which is also constantly checking and questioning about what is the placements and how whatever they're performing, how exactly it's impacting the audience, and what is the message they're trying to convey. So it's a very nuanced and judged way of presenting the art in itself. So these are two aspects which are being there. Uh, as an artist who is also a researcher, I would like to know, um, does religion and drag, do they come or intersect with each other? Is it a good idea to start with, or is there a fear of making drag, mixing drag with religion, which would make it very obnoxious, like Indian classical dance or Indian classical music, which we have it as of now?
So I think when you talk about sanitizing drag of its sexuality, um, whether through religion or just through these other kinds of other ways, I think what we don't realize is that we're actually pandering to the far right because that is who is accusing drag of. So we think we're being progressive by making drag safe, but it's in fact safe for who? Um, and under what auspices. So I think that that is just something we have to watch out as performers is to what, you know, people say drag is about gender, not about sexuality, but in fact, drag has been about sex work, and it has been about sexuality, and it's been about sexual identity expression for queer and trans people. So I wouldn't when I would just be careful of these moves to sanitize drag within progressive drag communities who are trying to protect the community from far right voices. Who do we leave out in that process? Um, at the same time, I do think that drag is part of ritual, right? Outside of faith, outside of sort of no, outside of like institutionalized religious practices, I think drag is part of a ritual. So my first book, Ishtael, I open with this sort of it starts with I fucking love drag queens. And it talks about the ritual they hold for making centering the nightclub, right? And giving us a reason to be there, giving us a relationship to each other and to them, right? There's a kind of deity work that drag is doing that is about building a kind of us, right? The way religion holds us together. So I think in a nightclub that is this like dispersed, confusing, messy space, I think drag is the thing that holds it together. Drag becomes the center. It's the we turn, and we talk about drag idolatry, right? We like actually we worship queens, we worship kings, we worship things like they we give them, we throw money at them, right? Like there's all these forms of worship, but also drag itself becomes its form of worship for the artist themselves when they're performing their own idols, whether it's Sri Devi or Celine Dion, right? These are idols who have actually given us voice and given us sound to rest in our bodies in a certain way. And so that too is spirit, right? When I was doing my research for my first book, several people actually use the language of spirit possession to say Madhuri took over my body, Sri Devi entered me, and that too is spirit. And I think only talking about spirit, faith, religion in terms of institutionalized religion, I recognize the kind of power structures that guide that conversation. But I think we also need to expand the idea of what we think of as belief, worship, faith, to include the everyday and pop culture. So to think about nightlife as ritual, I think is this place where we can see how practices of religion are transformed in sort of neoliberal cultures to and environments to see how people still make magic, right? Still live with magic and the more than the material.
Thank you so much for throwing that light in this topic as well. I'm just done with last two questions, uh, and the question right now is, the entire idea of this is something which I have had a conversation with Tifa Wine as well, that Tifa Wine and Landa Lakes, who is a two-spirited drag artist. on appropriation and the idea of appropriation, who should be able to appropriate a certain religion or certain faith or certain identity in one or the other way. And when drag is something which is presented, like it's more rooted in culture, it's self-developed art form. There are times where we kind of step out of the borders of our own identity and our own political ideologies, and we try to adapt something which is very different from our culture, which is picked up from some other culture. I have seen a lot of drag artists in India who have been learning a certain kind of an art form which is associated. It might be Vogue, or it might be how exactly they kind of work with ballroom, and then adapting the same kind of a culture with the tonality and language, or how exactly they speak a certain kind of a language, and try to present it as a performance. So when it comes to the idea of appropriation, how do we kind of look at drag and especially cultures which we are working with, and what could be one particular tip which you would like to kind of give away for any younger drag artist who is listening to this podcast on how to be conscious and self-aware when picking up things or creating a certain kind of an art?
You're asking the hard questions. I mean, as you know, especially seeing the growth of voguing and whacking in India, right? I think it's a really important question that you're asking. Um, I think there's there are a few things to say about this. One is that the hope for, when if you watch a movie like Paris is Burning, which is problematic in its own ways, but the folks in the film say, I want to see a ballroom in Japan, right? And it is in Japan, and it's in India, and it's in Germany, and it's in Amsterdam, and all of these places, right? So there was a hope for it to globalize, but they wanted it to globalize through their own bodies. They wanted the circulation and the travel. They wanted the folks who were performing at that time, and some of them are, so Vogue has globalized not just through YouTube, but also through the travel of Black and Latinx artists into other countries who have started houses. There are Indian folks who have been in the US ball scene, who are also in India, and who are cultivating the scene there. So there are some actually very intimate ties. Um, but this kind of like YouTube Vogue that people are picking up, I think, you know, having new languages for the body, having new ways of exploring your gender through dance are very important. But and so I'm not going to say don't vote, don't whack, but I do think it needs to be done. Um, I think no, I think that you have to acknowledge the communities it comes from, and you have to uplift those communities. And anti-blackness goes fully uninterrogated in India, in Indian queer spaces, and in India, period, right? It's the to be black in India is so can be so oppressive. Um, Especially these spaces of desire, right? The ways that Black bodies are marked as so dangerous by the media and such, or they're hyper fetishized, right? By in by Indian gay men, right? Like, and it's at least from what I've witnessed. So really trying to humanize Blackness as we use Black culture to stage our queerness and gender expansiveness, right? It is a gift that Black people have given us. And 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 at the same time, so many of us hate Black folks, right? And we cannot live like that, right? And we cannot reproduce that. I'm saying all of this, but I'm also, I think there's a way that like neoliberal language means that before a performance, someone is going to say some like boring disclaimer about, appropriation, blah blah blah, and then just do what they want to do. And I think we need more substantive ways to build bridges across difference. And I haven't lived in India for extensively for a while, since and so I don't know what that looks like right now, but I do think that the community does need to, the community of folks who are really invested in Black performance does need to interrogate what they're doing. And maybe, okay, maybe to be more concrete, maybe it means like fundraising to bring folks who are from the ball scene across the US to do workshops, right? And it's expensive to fund that kind of work, but like give them the opportunity to circulate and perform and teach because they're phenomenal teachers. I know, I think you've been to Vogue workshops in the US, and I have too. And I'm like, this is incredible pedagogy. There's so much talent. It looks nothing like what you see in India, and they're because they are living ball every day, right? And can we invite them to be part of that and treat them like the royalty that they are in the vault system, and give them the circulation they deserve. Okay, I've gone off long enough. Now I'm not sure what I'm saying anymore, but yeah, I those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you so much for adding up. And lastly, I know this is a topic which is very recent. With the with Trump administration kind of coming in, and with the entire space which is developed within US, which is very anti-trans. There are things which are happening, things which are said out loud, and I think the impact is so deep that it's kind of affecting people in queer spaces in India as well, where there's DNR being cut off, and this conversations corporates are doing very hush hush, because I work in a corporate, hence I'm very absolutely saying things which are the reality. Um, at this point in time, one of the major affected people within any kind of these countries are the youth, and the people who are still trying to dive in out of the world and trying to experience it. So, what would be that one message which you like to convey to the youth, especially somebody who might be uh, still in this fidget of coming in terms with their faith, and also trying to explore drag in one or the other way, which might not only specific to US, but also it transcends to other other continents as well, because we're all going through a similar kind of a lineup of hate directed towards us. If it's not happening now, but it will happen in the next couple of years. That's a rhetoric which we have seen. So, what is that one message or one thought which you would like to share with the younger lot?
I think the first thing I'd like to say is that faith can look like a lot of things, which means that just because the one that you grew up with, or the place of worship you attended as a child doesn't still hold you, doesn't mean that you have to give it up. But that faith can and should transform. Practices of faith can and should transform. And so that's one. Two, I think the way what you just articulated, the attack on trans life, I think it's important to remind folks that drag is a trans art, right? I think a lot of people are really invested in saying, I'm a cis man, cis woman, and I'm not trans, I just perform, right? But this sort of refusal of transness becomes this way of saying, I don't have to invest in trans politics either. But then we see how anti-trans sentiments becomes an attack on drag, right? At least in the case of the US. And so I do think that it's really important that we think with transness first, alongside faith, and we think expansively about both transness and what we're calling faith. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for addressing that question. I think it was a lovely conversation which I had with you. It's always I manifested for this And it's somewhere or the other way it worked out. So thank you so much for taking time
Yeah,
from your busy schedule and giving some very wonderful anecdotes and gems for us, for a lot of drag queens and drag artists across who are listening to who see you as an idol and who kind of listening to this conversation in one or the other way to learn. I think thank you so much for taking that time and being a part of this podcast. It adds a lot of value to the podcast. I think that is something which I
thank
would
you.
like to share personally.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to hear what other people have said as well. So thank you for including me in this.
Thank you so much. So that was the episode, people. I hope you all kind of loved it and you keep showering your love as always. You can follow us on Spotify. I'm also available for any questions or suggestions at pcsas number 3 at gmail.com. And you can also kind of subscribe and shower some love to all the artists who were a part of this particular series. I hope the series adds a lot of value, especially for people who would like to navigate their idea of faith and drag together. So I hope to kind of bring such more nuanced conversation as and when we go forward and keep showering the love. Until the next time, thank you so much and have a great day.